Welcome to part 3 of our Google Sheets Athlete Dashboard project, and in this episode we are going to finish off our line graphs by adding a selectable team and position average, where you will be able to select from a checkbox whether you want to add or take away those metrics, as well as finishing off the text logic for all of the headers of our line graphs. So let's get after it. Okay, so we're back and we are picking up where we left off in the last video, and as a quick reminder of how far we got, we created all of our outlines for our headers as well as our first KPI chart, and we are able to select the different metrics and then select the start date and be able to look at our graphs of any metric that we want. And we scaled every metric on a scale of 100 so that no matter which metric we select, they all look good. So moving on now, the first thing that we're going to do is just create the titles for our actual metrics. So the same way that we did the title for the dashboard up here, what I'm going to do is add a little bit of text logic. First thing I'll do is just make the text color white, and I'm going to type equals B3, which is going to be the name of the athlete, and then we want to add some spaces, so we'll use and quotation space quotation, and then another and. We want the test, so the test that is selected, which is stored in B11, and then we're going to add a few more words to this, so and quotation space, and then since double dots space quotation, and then we're going to add the text or the date. So we'll type in, and then for dates we actually have to use the text function. So I'll type in text, open that up, and select B12 where we have stored the date, and then a comma, and in quotations I'll put the format that I would like it to be in. In this case we want year, month, date, so I'll type in YYYY dash MM dash day, close off those quotations, and then close off the brackets and hit OK. And you can see now we have Dave's Pro Agility since 2020-01-01. We'll make that a little bit bigger, about 24, center it, and then maybe I'll just change the font here to Lato and make it bold. And you can see now that gives us our title, and if we were to change any of this variables, so maybe squat or the date, we can start to have a dynamic updating header which tells the user of this sheet exactly what they're looking at. Okay, so that's a quick way to kind of do that. And again, if we change the athlete, you can see that the name changes across the whole dashboard. So that's part 1. And now part 2, what we're going to do is add a selectable box where we can select and turn on whether or not we want the team average or the position average to show. So to do that, I'll just add a couple more boxes underneath our KPI chart here. One called team average and one called position average. And I'll just make the text here a little bit smaller so that they fit. And then I'm just going to color these yellow because they are going to be a selectable area. And inside of these cells, I'll just insert a checkbox. And these checkboxes, now I can just select them on or off. So we're going to use these on our actual data reference sheet. So moving over to the data reference sheet, I am going to now add a bunch more sections for this. So the first one we'll add is a team average include. The second one we'll add is the actual team average, and then team average score. And then we'll do the same thing for position. And because of this, I'm going to have to add some more boxes here as well. So I'll just drag this across for a few more just to preserve the formatting. And the first one we'll do is team average score, and then we'll do position average and position average score. Okay, and I'm going to color these orange so that they match the other ones that we have, because that signifies to me that we are going to be using these as titles for our calculations. Make everything a little bit smaller so it fits. So in order to do this, the first thing that we're going to have to reference is whether or not we want to include the team average based on the checkbox. So I'm going to do that here, and all I'm going to do is go into team average include, the box beside it, and I'll just type equals and then select the box where that checkbox lives, hit enter, and you can see it's giving me a false value because it's not selected. But if I were to go and select that value, it's going to give me a true value. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing down for position average just because we're here anyways. So all I've gone ahead and done is just when we've selected that, it gives me a true value, and when we have it turned off, it gives me a false value. Okay, so now from there, what we need to do is use a couple of formulas to pull out the actual team average. So the first one I'm gonna use is going to be the average formula. So I'm going to type equals average, open that up, and we want to find the average of index and the data. So remember, we have that named range for data. Close that off, and the row we don't care, but the column we want to match for. So we'll type match, open that up. And what do we want to match for? We want to look for the actual test. So we'll close off that. And where do we want to search for it? In headers. And then comma, close that off. And I'm going to close all of the brackets off and hit enter. So that will give us our actual team average. So we can check to see if that works. I'll just select the different KPI, counter movement jump, and that should have changed. So it's 28.1 is the team average for that metric. So let's go back and see how this works. So what this is doing is taking the average of the whole range from data if it matches the test selected in the headers. So I'm going to just kind of take you through how that works. I'll go back to the data. So basically what we've done is in our data tab, we have selected the counter movement jump. So it goes along and it looks through all of this data and it will return the column based on which one it matches along the headers here, in this case, counter movement jump. So it is going to take the average of all of that data there. Go back to our data reference. Now what we have to do is actually convert this to a score. So if you remember how we converted the score here, we're going to do the exact same thing. So what I'm going to type is equals mRound, because I know I'm going to be rounding this at the end, and I want a couple brackets. We want the actual team average minus the minimum value, and I'll close that off, divided by the maximum value minus the minimum value, close that off, put a bracket around the whole thing, and then I'm going to multiply that by 100, comma, and then what do I want to round it to? 0.5, and close that off, and it's going to give me a score of 40.5, which makes sense because it should be somewhere in the middle of our highest and lowest values. Okay, then the next thing we want to do is we actually want to pull these values out so that we can add them into our graph. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is use a formula that looks to see if anything is in these cells here, and if it is, then I want to return the actual team average. So what this is going to look like is equals if. The first if that we want to go through is if we even want to include this. So if D3 equals true, meaning that we do want to include the team average, I'm going to put comma, and then the second part of this formula is going to be an array formula, ARRAY formula. Open that up, and I'm going to do another if here. So there's going to be two conditions here that this needs to abide by. The second if is going to be if, open that up. We're going to look if any of the values have been returned. So we're going to look at the dates, go A10, double dots A. So we're going to look at all of these. If those do not equal nothing, meaning that something has been returned, then what I want to do is comma, value if true. I want to actually just pull out the value in D3. And if it's not, then nothing. Close that off. And then I'll close off the array formula. Otherwise, I want to return nothing and hit close the whole thing off. So let's look at this formula quickly. We have if D2, which is where we've stored whether or not we want to return the actual team average, is true. Then array formula, look at all of the dates. As long as they have some values, then return the team average. If they don't, then return nothing. Close off all the formulas, and then if the initial true wasn't true, then we're going to return nothing as well. Hit enter, and what you'll see is that for every value we have returned, it is going to give us that team average formula. Now the cool thing about this formula is I'm just going to copy it across for the actual team score. So what I'll do is go into this first cell and just highlight all of that and hit Control C. And then in my team average score, I am going to paste that formula in one more time. And the same thing is going to apply, except this time I want to return the actual score. So instead of D3, what we want to return is going to be D4. Hit enter, and that is going to be our team average score. And I'll just center justify those. So let's add that now to our graph. Okay, so what this looks like is in our graph, I'll double click on the graph and it will pull this open here. We'll go to our setup and I'm going to add a new range. So on the right side here, I can select a range and I'll hit add other range, select this whole range here, hit OK. And then what we'll do is add a series. I'll call it team average score. And you can see it's already put it on our graph. Let's just customize that series a little bit. If we go to kind of our series tab and go to team average score, I can give this a circle marker. I like to put it around 7 points, and we'll give this sort of a darker red color. I just think that looks a little bit better. And now you can see that our graph now includes our team average. If we wanted to, for whatever reason, put the values on there, we would do it the same way we did in the last video and just add the new range of the team average and put those data labels on there. So I'll close that off. I'm going to actually copy this now and put it on our KPI dashboard. I'll delete this old one and put the new one on there, and I'll just stick that in this area here. And you can see now, because we've made everything dynamic, I can actually turn on or off the team average based on this checkbox here. So when I have it turned on, it's giving the value of true. I want to include it. But when it's false, we're not referencing any of those values. Okay, so that's how we add the team average. Let's do a very similar set of steps for the position average. I'll leave that on true so that we can see the line. Go back to our data reference tab. Okay, so then the next thing that we have to do is actually pull out the positional average, and we're going to do that very similar to how we did the team average, except for now we're going to be using a function called average ifs because we have a condition of it has to match the position. So how we're going to do that is in the position average, I'll type equals average ifs, open that up, and we have to find our range again. So we'll use the index, open that up. We want to index our data. And then again, we don't care about row, but headers we want to match for. And what do we want to match is the actual test stored in B5, and we need to find that in headers, comma, close that down, close off the index. And now for the criteria range, what we want to do is match for position. So again, we're going to use that index, open that up. We want to look in data one more time. Row we don't care about, column we do. We're going to match again. Now we're going to match for position. So what I want to type is quotations position, because in my data set, that header is actually called position. And then I'll hit comma. Where do we want to look for that? In headers. And then comma, close off those. So that is going to be the range. So if you can see, it's asking us for a criteria range. Now what we want to do is the actual criterion, and I'll hit comma. And when do we want to do that is when it's equal to, in this case, B3, which is where we have our position stored. And I close that off. And what it should do is pull out the data that matches the test that we've selected when the position matches, and then average it. So when I hit enter, what you'll notice is it's giving us a different value than our team average because we have one athlete out of a different position. In this case, it is pulling out the position of both athletes who are coaches. And then now for the actual score, we can use this function one more time. So I'm just going to copy this, and then I will actually paste that here. And instead of D3 now, which would be the team average, we want to do the same thing now for the positional average and hit enter. So you can see our positional average score is 36. Let's just center justify all of these. So if you remember exactly how we did these formulas here, I'm going to copy the exact same thing. So what we'll do is we'll copy this formula and go through it one last time. Under position average, we have if D2 equals true, but in this case, we don't want D2. We want D5 because we want to know whether to include the positional average. So I'll put D5 in here. And now the array formula, we still want to look in the dates, but if we do actually have a true in there, then we want to return D6 instead of D3, which is our actual positional average, and we'll close that off. You can see it gives us those values one more time. And I will copy this formula for the last time and put it under our positional average score. And in this case, we want to return D7, and I'll hit enter. Okay, so now the last part here is just to put this on our actual graph. So we'll go back to our graph, double click, and data range will add one more series. And now we're going to add our positional average score and hit OK. And now I'll go to here, add my positional average score, and you can see it's given us kind of a line to put that on there. Let's customize that a little bit. We'll go to our series and I'll select that score, and maybe for this one we want it to be a dashed line, and maybe just a little bit thicker so that we can see it a bit easier. I don't know, maybe 3. And now we have sort of our dashed positional score line. And if I close this off, I'll copy this chart to the actual start, and we'll paste that in there. And you can see this now is starting to come together pretty nicely. And we have our chart all completed. So now I should be able to turn off the positional average, turn off the team average, but also turn them back on. Now, the one thing to note about Google Sheets, the way that it sets up its sheets is that if I was to turn off team average and keep positional average turned on, it will just move that series up. So the positional average in this case will actually have that red line that we wanted for team average. But as soon as I turn the team average back on, it pushes everything back to the right color and shape. So that's just one thing to keep a note on. What I want to do now is I'm just going to show you how to copy and add another one of these charts pretty quickly. So first thing I can do is this KPI chart 1. I can just copy that whole thing. I'm going to go down to A17 and just paste that in there and name this KPI chart 2 and hit enter. Now we can copy this whole text logic that we had. I'll just copy the whole bar and then paste it here. And let's just change our references. So instead of B23, we know we want B3 for the date. And instead of B31, we want B19 for our new test. And instead of B32, should be B20. There we go. So you can see we've just quickly changed our text logic around to create that. So that works. And now what we want to do is if I go back to my data reference tab, I'll just put this chart underneath, and I'll move this little formula back in here, and I'm going to cut off this here because we had one extra cell. And what I can do is just copy this whole thing, Control C, and just paste it over one. And now instead of this, we want KPI chart 1, or sorry, KPI chart 2. And we just have to fix some of these references. So we know that the athlete is going to be stored in B3. So I'm going to type equals KPI chart B3, and we're just going to put some of these references back together. Our VLOOKUP, if we look back here, we want it to look at J2, but we want it to look in athlete info A2 to F. So I'll just fix that chart there. Enter, it should pull that out. Now the test, if we fix that, it's in KPI chart J11, but if we fix that reference, we'll hit equals, go back to our KPI dashboard and select the new test, which is stored in B19, hit enter. And you can see right away a lot of our formulas and things start to work because of the way we have them set up. The only one that isn't seeming to work now is our standard. So let's see where that got messed up. It is looking in J10 to J, that should work. And it is still referencing the old CMJ max and min values. So what we need to do is just bring those now. So instead of B, if I just change all of these to J, that should work. Hit enter. And now it's switched all of our values around. Now we just have to go to our team average includes. So what I want to do here is instead of J13, the include is going to be stored in J21. Hit enter, and you can see these formulas all work now. And the same thing here, if I fix this, enter or equals KPI chart B22, hit enter. And now all of our references work. Because we have all of our formulas set up properly, it's pretty easy now just to add all of our values back in. Now I can just copy this chart, Control C, Control V, and I'll just paste this under here so we know which one it refers to. If I double click here, all I have to do now is change the ranges. So I'll go to select data range, and we know that in this case, the dates were stored in A9 to basically A. Now they're stored in I. So if I change these to I, that'll give me my new dates, and I just want it to go all the way down. For C, that was our scores or our standard. So now that's stored in K. So if I change that to K, again, I'm going to take the 1000 out because I want it to go all the way down. Our values are stored in J now. So if I switch that around, J, take out the 1000, and then we have our averages. Instead of E, now it's M. So if I switch those, and we want that to go all the way down, so I'll just give it right to M. And then finally, our last one is stored in O, and I'll delete that and hit OK. And you'll see our chart change because our scores are all different now. And if I copy this, I can paste it right on the front of this KPI dashboard, and it will be linked to all of my new references. Now what Google Sheets does is it'll give me sort of a red line here when it's lined up, and I can drag it over to the other side and it will line it up again, and it just sits right in that box nicely. I can switch around the tests, and that chart should work fine now too. Turn on or off the team averages, switch the date that I want to see things from. Oh, maybe that reference isn't quite fixed. Let me fix that reference quickly too. So I'll go back to my data reference, and oh yeah, so it's not referencing the right column. So the start date, let's switch that one, hit equals, back to our KPI dashboard, and it's in B20. So that switches everything around there. If I go back to my here, I can switch my start date around and look at as many values as I want. So I am going to do that for the last chart, and then in the next video, we will get on to making some of the other types of charts. I hope this video helps you out. We are well on our way to completing this KPI dashboard project, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.